This is a 2025 Kia Sorento Hybrid SX Prestige, the fourth generation of Kia's mid-size crossover SUV hybrid, which just received an update. In fact, it's the same update that the non-hybrid Sorento received for the 2024 model year. You now get a new front and rear fascia and an updated interior, but the same hybrid powertrain. And you choose between two trims, an EX and this SX Prestige. This new Kia Sorento definitely looks better, but do these new updates make it drive any better? Let's find out. I review all kinds of cars and I have fun every time. Please subscribe and join me. The base price for a new front-wheel drive Kia Sorento Hybrid EX is $40,065. Going instead with the SX Prestige Hybrid raises that price to $48,265. And my test car did include a few small options and cost $49,090. Okay, with that, now is a good time for me to pull over and show you around and inside and under the hood of this new updated Kia Sorento. Looking at the front of the car, it's a pretty big change from the outgoing model, and I would say it is definitely an improvement. Kia took a lot of inspiration from the Telluride, and you can see that in these vertically stacked headlamps right here, and just generally a more squared off vertical grille up front. But despite all the styling changes that you see right here, I'm still more interested to show you what's underneath this hood. Well, there you have it. Your turbocharged 1.6 liter hybrid engine, 227 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque, total system power. The front axle centerline is basically right at the front of this strut tower right here, following along this hunk of harness right here. So much of the engine is in front of the front axle centerline. But the Kia Sorento SX Prestige is standard all-wheel drive, plus the 1.5 kilowatt-hour battery pack is farther back as well, so that distributes the weight a little bit. So it's not too terrible. Finally, windshield washer fluid is right up front on the passenger side, real easy to get to right here. Looking at the Sorento Hybrid in profile, this gives you a good look at the mineral blue exterior paint. I think it's a perfectly lovely color. Overall, aside from the contrasting colors, this is a relatively simple two-box crossover SUV design. And again, I think Kia executed well. Also, it looks a little bit bigger than it actually is. I will go ahead and put the dimensions up on the screen for you to check out and let you know that I have a lot more information in the description. The one and only wheel size for the Kia Sorento Hybrid is a 19-inch wheel, and I have to say, in the modern era of big, it is completely welcome to see. And look at this, you actually have a little bit of tire sidewall to work with. And yes, this is a square setup. The wheel and tire in back is the same size as what's in front. Looking at the Sorento Hybrid from the rear, again, lots of Telluride influence here. You can see that with the vertically mounted taillights right here, and then no tailpipes or faux tailpipes of any kind. Thank goodness. There's one single tailpipe down here underneath the car, just as it should be. The Kia Sorento has the option to get the smart open tailgate, which automatically opens up after a few seconds of recognizing that the key fob is nearby. That is something that is easy to turn off in the center display if you don't want that feature. And it shows you your cargo space. All 13 cubic feet of cargo space when you have all the seats up. As you can see, if you do need to carry 7 people, you don't have a lot of cargo back here. Fortunately, this is easy to fold down to bring more room. Pull on these straps, and now you have 45 cubic feet of cargo space and still room for 4. And when you're back here, you can also see that we do have 12-volt power right here and some buttons that if we need more cargo space and only have to carry 2 people, just press these. This seatbelt was buckled. Okay, it would have gone down completely automatically if that seatbelt wasn't buckled, I promise you. And with both rows folded down, you actually get 75 cubic feet of storage and still room for you and a passenger. And you can see it's a fairly generous space, not too terribly wide, but fairly deep. And I would bet plenty of room for my bike, but let's find out. Yeah, no problem at all. Slid in without trouble, plenty wide, a little bit on the high side, and plenty deep as well. You can see I have several inches of space right here. So yeah, you can carry a bike, no problem. All right, let's take a look inside. The single most expensive option on this Sorento Prestige is what they call Blue Dust Interior Package, which gives us this blue leather as opposed to black, and two-tone, as you can see on the doors, to add just a little bit less black to this whole space. And speaking of black, the privacy panel of the panoramic roof is closed. Let me fix that. Push button start is right here. Much better. You have a couple of buttons on the captain's chairs. This one down here to make easy access to the 2 seats in back. This is a 6-passenger SUV as equipped. And you can see that we also have a nice cup holder, a space, and a USB Type-C port right there, and another one on the other side. And that's where those buttons are to fold the second row from the liftgate. Also, the third row has another button up at the top to do the same thing from the third row. I am 5 feet 11 inches tall, and you can see I have several inches of knee room right here. Also, the seat bottoms are pretty darn high, so I have decent thigh support. Put that together, I definitely have less than a 90-degree bend in my knees. I also have heated seats for the second row, manual sunshades, a nice little cup holder right there, my own personal armrest right here, which is also adjustable, 12-volt power, and AC power right there. That's nice to have. And second row passengers have great access to these USB Type-C ports right here, and a fair amount of natural light as well. If you get an EX trim Kia Sorento hybrid, you would get synthetic leather, but it's real leather for the SX Prestige trim. Looking at the front door, you can see that we have 2-position driver seat memory right here and the typical controls right here. We do have a couple buttons to the left of the steering wheel, including another way to open the liftgate and traction control on off. You can adjust both the tilt and telescope of the steering manually right here. The seats themselves are 14-way power adjustable. That includes adjustable thigh support and plenty of lumbar support options as well. The steering wheel itself is a fairly small diameter wheel, and it is reasonably thick for a decent grip. You do also have plenty of controls, cruise control options on the right, media controls on the left. You also have paddle shifters, upshift on the right, downshift on the left. These are also off-throttle battery charging, so you can decrease the amount of D-cell charging you get when you lift off the throttle with the positive, increase it with the negative. And you are also looking at what Kia calls the panoramic curved display. It is 2 12.3-inch screens, one right next to the other. The first one being your instrument cluster, the second one being your center display. The center display is standard equipment, but on the EX trims you get analog gauges and a 4.3-inch screen right here in the center. This also gives you wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. That is standard equipment, as is this dual zone climate control that you see right here, but specific to the SX Prestige, heated and ventilated front seats and a heated steering wheel as well. Heated seats are standard on the EX, but not the ventilated seats. You also get a couple more USB Type-C ports right there, as well as a wireless phone charger right there. Just behind that is your dial-operated Prindle. Beneath that, We have our drive modes right here, as well as a few other buttons. I showed you the heated steering wheel. This is also access to cameras, hill descent control, and your electric parking brake. And right next to that, we have a couple of reasonably sized cup holders that are fairly deep, a nice little tray right here, and then lower center console storage right there with this nice little removable tray. A couple of more SX Prestige features, a high-end Bose sound system to listen to, and a suede headliner. Isn't that lovely? You do also have a rear view mirror that doubles as a screen for another camera back there. Let's dig into the drive modes. You do have a few. Do not have normal. That is not one of the drive modes. You either have Eco, Sport, Smart, or Snow, and you can also lock the center differential. It also shows up on the center screen right here, Eco, Sport, Smart, and Snow. We will be spending most of our time in the Eco driving mode. This is a hybrid after all, but we'll definitely dabble in Sport and see if we feel any differences as Smart as well. But to do that, we have to get back to the drive. So let's get back to the drive. All right, let's dig into the powertrain. Where does 227 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque come from? Well, just as before, it comes from a turbocharged 1.6 liter inline 4-cylinder, and that engine does do most of the work, especially when it comes to horsepower. It makes 177 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque. But the electric motor that's part of this makes 59 horsepower and also 195 pound-feet of torque, but at different speeds. So collectively, that's why we get the peak horsepower and torque that we do. The electric motor gets its energy from a fairly large 1.5 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery pack. And the internal combustion engine bolts up to a 6-speed automatic transmission, pretty low number of gears for the modern era, but this transmission is built for the hybrid setup, and that's probably why Kia continues to use it. And it's a perfectly reasonable transmission. The ratio spread is actually pretty wide considering that we're dealing with 6 gears, and the electric motor helps quite a lot when it comes to filling in those slightly larger gaps between gears. Because we're in an SX Prestige, this is a standard all-wheel drive vehicle, but if you go with an EX Sorento hybrid, you choose between front or all-wheel drive. And really, it's a pretty stout powertrain. If I floor the accelerator, give it a moment to kick down, but you actually get pretty darn decent pull. That's not explosive acceleration by any means, certainly, but plenty of power to get you moving. Now, the kickdown is a tiny touch on the slow side, but otherwise, it's stout. Switch it to the sport driving mode, and you get an instant kick back a little bit because the throttle map changes quite a bit. The same position of your foot is asking for more horsepower all of a sudden. But anyway, for the accelerator, yeah, and the kickdown is ultimately about the same, but you're already starting in a slightly higher gear, and it wants to get to the highest gear possible, the highest revs possible, lowest gear possible, and you get really pretty solid pull. In fact, it makes it pretty easy to pass. That's easy work in this not that small SUV. We are just under 190 inches long. This is the biggest SUV that Kia makes until you get to the Telluride. Now, there is a third driving mode. It's called Smart, and the idea of this driving mode is that it will adapt to your driving style and complement it. Basically, it's between Eco and Sport driving modes. Switches to Sport driving mode, floor the accelerator, and yeah, it's good. The torque, 258 pound-feet, and the fact that it is evenly split between instantly reacting electric motor torque and the internal combustion engine torque, you can just feel stout pull all the way through the rev range. That's really nice. And in the Smart driving mode, you're basically in between Eco and Sport, a little bit closer to Sport, I would guess. Otherwise, this engine hums along in the background nice and quietly. You can hear the 4-cylinder buzzing along in the background. It's not silent, certainly, but it's generally a smooth operating, smooth engaging, seamlessly transitioning between electric and internal combustion engine powertrain. I'm honestly quite happy with it. Robin Warner cutting in from the future real quick, because there's one other thing about the powertrain that I wanted to talk about. One other adjustment, you could say, and that is the adjustable off-throttle D-cell that you get to recharge the battery. You have 4 different levels: coasting and levels 1, 2, and 3. You use the shift paddles to get to those different levels. So when you're in the sport driving mode, the shift paddles change gears for you. But when you go to the eco driving mode, you're back in drive, and those same shift paddles now adjust the off-throttle D-cell. I'm currently in coasting, so if I lift off the throttle, I'm not quite coasting. It's just a little bit more than coasting. Now I'm at level 1, off the throttle, and yeah, it feels like, I don't know, half a tenth. Okay, level 2. Off the throttle again. Yeah, and that's getting, like, that's a solid tenth of a G of D-cell right there. All right, level 3. Off the throttle again. And that is the maximum amount of D-cell, and I think we're about to 1/10.5 of D-cell here. It's not full-on one-pedal driving, certainly. You would need more D-cell than that to have that kind of confidence. Whatever setting you put it at, it will stay there. It's not like it goes back to 1 whenever you hit the throttle again or anything like that. Honda does that with its system. But once you turn the car on and off, it does go back to the default. All right, back to Robin of the past, I guess I'll say. And being a hybrid definitely has its perks, especially when it comes to fuel economy. You get 34 miles to the gallon in the city and the highway and combined. Now, if you go with the front-wheel drive version of the Sorento, that does tick up a little bit. It's 36 miles to the gallon across the board. But there's actually one other number I want to share. According to the EPA, the official driving range of the Kia Sorento hybrid is 602 miles. More than 600 miles between fill-ups. That's pretty impressive. But while fuel economy is very important, it's not nearly as much fun as accelerating. Of course I had to test it. Let me show you that right now. All right, everybody, time for an acceleration test in this updated Kia Sorento hybrid. See how this hybrid powertrain can carry along this new body and interior. I do have it set in the sport driving mode, and I do have traction control limited, though with standard all-wheel drive, I am not expecting any wheel slip, but let's find out. Okay, coming to a complete stop. Floor the accelerator. Up, there we go. Nice. Okay. Not bad. Yeah, all right, we're moving along just fine. Yeah, good pep, good torque. We only have a 6-speed transmission for gear changes, but with the electric motor providing 195 pound-feet of torque on its own, and then the engine helping out, we have nice, robust pull. We do have a little bit of a soft launch, but then once everything kicks in, we get like a second jerk back. I did play around with it a little bit ahead of time, and I saw 0 gains with brake torquing or anything like that. Kia says that the Sorento hybrid will go 0 to 60 2 miles an hour, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 9.1 seconds. And yeah, that feels completely accurate and totally reasonable to me. Perfectly fine acceleration in this hybrid Kia Sorento. All right, let's dig in the chassis. This is the most common setup you can get. Strut suspension up front, multi-link suspension in the rear. This is a unit construction, car-based crossover SUV, and it is 4-wheel independent suspension. And it is a relatively simple one. There's no adaptive shock absorbers or air suspension or anything like that, and it's just as well. That adds complication, that adds cost. And given the category of vehicle that we are talking about, I think that Kia did a pretty good job to compromise between ride and handling. It is not so soft that it floats around and feels underdamped in any situation, but Otherwise, it absorbs bumps and lumps and undulations on the road without any trouble. So it's generally comfortable, but not like wafting around soft. Part of that is this structure. This is a nice, solidly built structure that Kia builds the Sorento from, and obviously it's the same structure, basically at least, as the Kia Sorento non-hybrid that I got to experience in Colorado several months ago. And we took it through lots of elevation change, some bumpier roads, and some gravel roads as well. And it felt stout and assured and solid throughout all of that driving as well. It's just generally a good solid structure. And it's also a comfortable one. The seats are a reasonable level of supportive. I could use a little bit more bolstering to feel in the seat a little bit more, but it's generally supportive. There's good lumbar support and the material is comfortable. The leather is soft, so I find it comfortable. And that's true on roads like this or on the interstate. I did test it there as well. Let me show you that. All right, everybody, time for a quick stint on the interstate. See how the Sorento feels on the open road. We do have plenty of driving aids. Kia calls it DriveWise. We also have highway driving assist too, which is adaptive cruise control and lane centering, all those things, but it'll also do lane change for you. But it is not a sustained hands-free system. It is still level 1.5, I guess you could say. They still want your hands on the wheel, but they'll change your lanes for you. We'll also just see how it feels on the road. Okay, on the interstate, up to speed, cruise control is set at 78 miles an hour to go with traffic. I do have lane centering and all the assistance stuff on, and we are going through a curve right now, so I'll take my hands off the wheel. And yeah, centering pretty darn well. Now I'm going to try a lane change. All I did was tap the signal. It wants my hands on the wheel. I'll try one more time. There it goes. There it goes. Yep, it's doing that all on its own. I had my hands on the wheel for the start of it, but then it took over and it does turn off the turn signal for you as well. So yeah, works pretty well. Also, we do have a 3-lane interpretation of what the car sees on the road. Let me show that to you real quick. It has a green arrow to show you the center of the lane, and it does show traffic on either side of you. I'm currently in the fast lane, so that's why it's only showing me one side at the moment. But yeah, pretty slick setup. More fundamentally, the engine is running, even though we are in the eco driving mode and do have about 3/4 of a charge for the battery pack. But in a non-plug-in hybrid, that is expected. The engine is turning at about 2,400 RPM, and you can hear it a little bit, but it is largely in the background, pleasant enough. And for a 1.6 liter engine with a 6-speed transmission, 2,400 RPM is a fairly low engine speed. And considering the class of vehicle this is, this is definitely in the mainstream category. Wind noise and road noise is reasonable. You can hear some buffeting around the door seams a little bit here and around the front side view mirrors for sure. We do have acoustic glass for the windshield, but not for the front side windows. And road noise, it's there, but it's not bad. So yeah, it's a perfectly reasonable interstate car. And I have to say, a pretty darn comfortable one as well. And pretty darn efficient too. So, what do I think of this 2025 Kia Sorento Hybrid? Yeah, there's a lot to like here. I definitely like the way that Kia moved directionally in its design. Clearly, the Telluride proved a very popular vehicle, a very popular design, and the Sorento is the next biggest Kia crossover SUV that they have, so it accepts the form of the Telluride better than any of its other SUVs, like the Seltos and the Sportage. This looks most appropriate as a Telluride-like vehicle. Also, the interior is quite nice. This panoramic curved display is easy to use and also not overwhelming. Now, the driving itself, it's basically the same as it has been since the 4th generation came out. No major change there, but that's not a bad thing. The modern Sorento drives smoothly, relatively quietly, and especially in this hybrid, pretty darn efficiently as well. Does this Sorento drive better with the update? In the sense of overall driver and passenger convenience, yeah, it does. Because you have all this new stuff and none of it detracts from the way it drove before. So no, the front end doesn't respond to your inputs better and it's not worlds faster than before or anything like that. But the overall experience of being in this car for however long you need to be in it is better. I'm Robin Warner. Thank you very much for watching.